Welcome to Undercurrents, our daily news show from Unheard's Washington Bureau. Happy Monday. Today's guest is Shelby Talcott. Make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv to join the Undercurrents community for just $1 for your first month. You get special premium content. You get to ask me questions, and I get to answer them, one of my favorite things. So if you head on over there, undercurrents.tv, you can join the community. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts too. Now let's get on to the news because, as usual, there is a lot of it. It's officially week 4 of Trump 2.0, and the president is fresh off an appearance at the Super Bowl, during which he was cheered while Taylor Swift was booed. Trump, of course, posted on Truth Social about that almost immediately, taking a little victory lap after it happened. He also declared Sunday to be the Gulf of America Day and had a ceremony aboard Air Force One. He then said the U.S. would be phasing out the penny, which, interestingly enough, was actually something Barack Obama always saw favorably as well. Trump really feels like he has the wind at his back, even after weeks of what people here in DC and in the media view as utter turmoil. But turmoil, of course, seems to kind of be the point. And honestly, voters aren't reacting that poorly either. A CBS poll released on Sunday before the game found Trump with a 53% approval rating among adults overall. That same poll found him up 10 points with adults under 30 at 55% approval. So it's really no surprise that in his pre-Super Bowl interview with Fox News anchor Bret Baier, Trump stood firmly by Elon Musk and DOGE.
I don't know if it's kickbacks or what's going on, but the people, look, I ran on this, and the people want me to find it. And I've had a great help with Elon Musk, who's been terrific.
Bottom line, you say you trust him.
Trust Elon? Oh, he's not gaining anything. In fact, I wonder how he can devote the time to it. He's so into it. But I told him do that. Then I'm going to tell him very soon, like maybe in 24 hours, to go check the Department of Education. He's going to find the same thing. Then I'm going to go to the military. Let's check the military. We're going to find billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse. And, you know, the people elected me on that.
So DOGE, of course, has big plans for week 4 and week 5, 6, 7, 8, all of the weeks. But coming up on this week, DOGE is ready to turn its attention to even more departments. Federal workers are coming back into the office, and Donald Trump has confirmation votes ahead of him on Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. So here to explain what this momentum, both politically and I'd say pop culturally, means for the administration this week, we have Semafor White House correspondent Shelby Talcott joining us. Shelby, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Anytime.
So let's start with this, where I forget even what week of the Trump presidency. It feels like year 2, but there's no steam running out at all. There's no sign that they're running out of steam. All signs indicate actually that they're continuing to plow ahead at breakneck speed. Is that the sense that you get, that it's not like flood the zone for the first few weeks, to borrow the phrase from Steve Bannon that everyone is now saying explains the pace of change in the second Trump administration? It seems like everything is still going literally full speed ahead.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I think every week we start the week and think, okay, what possibly has not been done yet? And every single week there are more things that the Trump administration announces, whether it's executive orders, whether it's memos, whether it's, the president going to a football game for the first time ever. There's always something new, and it's not just going to last the first few weeks of the administration. It's going to last as long as they can possibly make it last, from my understanding, which could be a while, because remember, the transition team over the past 2 months before Trump was inaugurated, that was their focus. They were, focused on getting together their cabinet picks and getting together the group of people who were going to work in the administration, but they were also really focused on how can we really blitz as much as we can? What executive orders can we put out? Because we want this to be sort of a shock and awe administration.
And Trump, let's talk about the Super Bowl, actually, since you mentioned it yesterday, goes on Air Force One, has the whole thing about the Gulf of America. What did he technically sign? The legislation was like ceremonial, something on Air Force One. Okay, so it's
like a Gulf of America day while he was traveling over what is now called the Gulf of America.
That's right. He said that February 9th would, from here on out, be referred to as Gulf of America Day, and signed the little proclamation in front of reporters. Then he says he's phasing out the penny. He's on camera, makes a big show of being at the Super Bowl. First president ever. It seems unbelievable, but first president ever to be in a Super Bowl. And then Taylor Swift gets booed. Trump posts on Truth Social about Taylor Swift getting booed. It None of this is surprising, Shelby, but can you just maybe, if you have any insight into how Trump world reacted to the just ceremonial presence at the Super Bowl, that would be great.
They were pumped. I mean, again, this is sort of Donald Trump's bread and butter. And I think it was like a full circle moment for a lot of Trump administration officials who also worked on the campaign. Because remember, this was kind of
Mm,
like one of their big target audiences. They went to football games during the campaign, they
mm,
went to WWE fights, they went on all these independent podcasts that were really geared towards younger men. And that is so this is kind of a full circle moment for them being able to go to this football game. It's something that Donald Trump likes. So it was exciting for them, but also I think they planned this so that
mm.
not only would the football game itself be newsy, but you would have, as you said, the news about the Gulf of America. He announced that he plans to implement tariffs on today and tomorrow. He announced that they're going to get rid of the penny. He made fun of Taylor Swift. This was like an all day event for them. And it was not just, okay, we're going to get news out of the Super Bowl, but it was, we're going to get news out of the Super Bowl. Plus, we're going to make this into a whole entire spectacle where we get, 6 other headlines from it.
Mm. Okay, so that's really interesting. I was reading Ben Smith, obviously, from Semafor's interview with Steve Bannon over the weekend. And in it, you could just hear Bannon suggesting or making this argument that all of these moves are calculated by Trump to switch the media cycle, to turn the media's attention in one direction and then swivel it in another direction. So I guess I'm curious, just as I was watching this all play out yesterday, I'm thinking, to what degree is this all choreographed? And what's your sense of that, Shelby?
It's more choreographed than people think, and I say
Mm,
that because I've talked to White House officials and asked them, like, "How are you prioritizing all of this?" Right? How are you prioritizing doing the executive orders, getting threatening tariffs, revoking people's security clearances, going to the Super Bowl? What is the sort of focus? And what people have told me consistently is what you don't realize is we've planned for this. This is what we
mm,
were doing during the transition. And so it is all intentional. And I think there's a few reasons for it. First of all, it is, as Bannon says, if you overwhelm the systems, then they can't really quote unquote fight back, right? You can't have the resistance media fighting back. You can't have the Democrats focused. It took the Democrats a week to come up with a sort of game plan against DOGE, which ended up being holding press conferences and going to these departments and trying to enter the building. So that alone is notable. But then you also have the fact that a lot of Trump administration officials realize that, yes, Donald Trump has 4 years in office, but really they have 2 years where they know they can get a significant amount done because they have the trifecta in Washington.
Now, Trump in his pre Super Bowl interview with Brett Baer, again, not surprising, but interesting, totally stood by Elon Musk. And he has done this over and over again over the course of the presidential transition and now into his presidency itself. Every time there's a media report that there's cracks in the foundation of their relationship, Donald Trump comes out and looks like he's telling the truth, says, Elon's doing a great job. So, Shelby, what's your sense of whether Doge is on shaky footing with Trump? It seems like the answer is no.
I think the answer is no. And again,
Curious.
there have always been people in Donald Trump's orbit who are a little bit skeptical of Elon Musk. We heard it during the transition. We heard people say he's hanging around Mar-a-Lago too much. He has too much influence. He has too much power. But ultimately, all of that noise doesn't matter if Donald Trump himself is happy with Elon Musk. And we don't know. Donald Trump is not a person who typically you can't tell what he's thinking, right? He is not a person who will hide the ball for a really long time. So if he's saying publicly and repeatedly that he's pretty happy with Elon Musk, that's the case. Now, could that change? Of course. It's Donald Trump, it's Elon Musk. They are two very aggressive figures who do things splashy and do things big, and that can change in an instant. But right now, clearly Donald Trump is very happy with what Elon Musk is doing. And so at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
What do you get the sense is on Elon's desk for this week? Like that's it's so seems so hard to predict because he's just kind of moving from one thing to the other, and it kind of depends how the employees are reacting. Like that's a lot of how USAID, my understanding, ended up getting blown up so quickly is because there was intense resistance. So what should we expect to see in the next few days?
Yeah, I think it's an open question. And as you said, just to build off of that, it's not only sort of what the employees and how they're reacting, but from my understanding, it's they're following the money. And so
Mm.
USAID was sort of the first pick because it was the most obvious for them. And so as they continue following the money, who knows where they end up. But Donald Trump did just give them last week permission to go to defense money. I think that's going to be a really big focus coming up really soon. But I also think there's going to be some focus on these fights, right? The judge ruling that they can't access the Treasury Department payments. That's going to be a focus. So I think the focus is going to shift a little because now you're seeing pushback and you're seeing legal issues that they're going to have to also deal with as they're trying to advance the Department of Government Efficiency.
And is there any dissent among the ranks? I mean, you see some people, sort of an outside conservative world, maybe criticizing here or there, saying, yeah, birthright citizenship, not sure that that's legally sound, whatever it is. But it seems as though inside there's really not much dissent. But maybe I'm wrong, Shelby. Have you seen any of that?
I haven't seen a significant amount of dissent. I mean, you always have kind of like the Steve Bannon versus Elon Musk drama.
Sure.
Um, but by and large, this really feels like Donald Trump's party, and he
Hmm.
has the party on lockdown.
How are they feeling about the cabinet picks? Obviously, those votes on Tulsi and RFK Jr. are coming up this week. What's their sense of whether they've fully convinced enough senators to take the plunge?
I don't think that there's much dissent. There's always sort of the Steve Bannon versus Elon Musk
Mm.
drama, and there's always sort of exceptions to the rule. But by and large, this feels like Donald Trump's Republican Party. And that's really different from his 2016 win, obviously, where he didn't have really the full force of the Republican Party behind him always. Now, things could change very quickly, but right now, that does seem to be the case. The party seems pretty deferential to what Donald Trump wants to do.
Now, there was an incident last week I kind of found instructive for a couple of reasons, but one of which is you have this. So, just to brief everyone, DOGE affiliated kid whose Twitter's exposed by the Wall Street Journal for containing posts that said things like, quote, normalize Indian hate, that I think a lot of people in online right circles would defend as jokes. They don't really play as a joke when you're in the government at all. So, he's let go. Then he comes back after JD Vance says he should come back, and there's this outcry. It felt like we were living in like 2019 cancel culture world, and then suddenly reminded that we weren't living in that world and that Trump is president again and doesn't play by any of the rules. Do you have any insight, Shelby, into what we should be making of that?
Well, it's really fascinating because I think one of the things that Donald Trump sort of ran on, not aggressively, but it was kind of like a sub focus of his campaign was this kind of anti culture, cancel culture, anti
Mm-hmm.
wokeness agenda. That's sort of what this side of the party has been arguing about for years. And I think it's interesting also because Donald Trump was actually asked about JD Vance. JD Vance essentially said this kid should not be punished for stupid social media posts and that we should not reward journalists who are seeking to destroy people's lives. And of course, Elon Musk also got involved because he started this whole thing by posting a poll on X saying, should I bring this kid back? And then Donald Trump was asked about it, and it didn't seem like Donald Trump really knew what was going on, but he was like, I'm with my vice president." And so after all of that happened, Elon Musk said, "Okay, I'm going to bring this kid back." And it does go to show that there is an extreme push against cancel culture. And again, these kids, like whether these posts were jokes or not, you probably can't say that online, especially when you're working in the US government. So, I think these concerns were serious, but it shows that this party is super anti cancel culture because the other end of the spectrum has just swung so far to the left. And so we're seeing everything being brought back towards the middle in a way.
I took the subway into work this morning and it did feel a lot more crowded. And that's because a lot of federal workers are coming back downtown in person to the offices. And I'm curious if you've heard anything about how DOGE is kind of preparing to deal with that resistance. Obviously, they used the buyouts and there's legal battles over the buyouts to kind of winnow the existing workforce already. Just if you don't want to be here, take a buyout. But now that people are really going to come back into the office, a lot of hesitance over these buyouts, the legality of them, how it'll work. So people are coming back. Do they have plans for what to do when inevitably this happened for the first Trump administration? People just start telling them no, sort of like what happened at USAID. And then they kind of just almost totally got rid of USAID.
Yeah, I think the Trump administration has been pretty clear that they want loyalists on board. And if you are somebody who is either saying no to what Donald Trump wants implemented or pushing back or trying to secretly sort of circumvent the president's agenda, then you are going to be out. So I think these buyouts were kind of a way out for people. And the last I heard, that number was over 60,000 people had taken the buyouts. I think that's still going up because the judge put a pause on that deadline that was originally going to be last week.
Hmm.
But that was kind of like the Trump administration's way of saying, okay, we'll let you out, we'll pay you. Although there's questions about whether it's going to hold up in court, etc.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they're going to be done. I think that they're going to continue to reduce the workforce as people come back into the office and maybe push back on some of the things that Trump wants.
Now, votes are imminent on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. How are they feeling about that, Shelby? Do they have any contingency plans, or are they confident that they've got enough senators on their side at this point?
I think they're confident. I think that there
Ooh.
were definitely times in the past few weeks where some of their allies were nervous about both of those picks, but things have changed. It feels like the winds have shifted, and I think
Ooh.
Tulsi is going to have a little bit of a harder time than Kennedy, but I anticipate them both getting through, and I think the Trump team is cautiously optimistic that they're both going to get through.
It's so fun to force people to make predictions when you're interviewing them, Shelby. So we'll be
Yeah,
sure to
don't
roll
hold
back
me to
the tape.
that.
Oh my gosh, Shelby Talcott, thank you so much for joining the show and sharing all of these insights. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.
I think it's going to be a pretty interesting week ahead. Like I told Shelby, a whole lot of people that seem to be coming back into the office when I made my commute this morning. So that could be a recipe for even more interesting confrontations between DOGE and federal workers. So we'll be keeping our eye on that here in the Undercurrents studio. Make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the premium experience. You can join the Undercurrents community. You get a special email address that lets you send questions our way. Please subscribe here on YouTube. It's super helpful. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you back here with more Undercurrents soon.